Hi, in this video I'm going to talk about the Obtainium app and show you how to use it. Basically, Obtainium is an app that lets you download and install Android apps from outside the Google Play Store, and more importantly, it enables you to receive updates for those apps automatically. And there are many reasons why you might want to do this. For example, you might want to install an app that just isn't available on the Play Store. Or you might not want to sign into a Google account, especially if you're using an actually secure OS like Graphene OS, instead of the regular spyware that comes with your phone. Or maybe you just want to reduce your reliance on proprietary platforms in general. So, if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, keep watching. If not, I'll give you a few seconds to go ahead and stop watching. Okay, now that they're gone, we can speak freely. So, let's go over a real-world use case for Obtainium. There's this app called Revanced Manager that's not available on the Play Store because it goes against their terms of service. It's an open source app and it's available for download on GitHub, which, if you're not familiar with GitHub, it's basically a website that hosts all kinds of open source software. So if I wanted to install Revanced Manager on my phone, it's pretty simple to do. I just go to their GitHub page, which is what we see on the screen here. I scroll down, I look for their releases section, which is right here. I pick the release that I want. In this case, I'm just going to go with the latest one. I scroll down to the assets section, and I click on the APK file that they have here, and I download it. An APK file, by the way, is the app installation file that contains the actual app itself. It's kind of like an installer on Windows or any other OS. Once the file is downloaded, I can open it up in my Files app, I tap on it, and I can install it. And there we go, the app is installed. The problem with this method is, first of all, the obvious one. It's very inconvenient, right? You have to go through all those steps to do something that would have just been one click if you were using the Play Store. The real problem, though, is that I'm not going to automatically get updates for this app. You know, it's not like the developer of Revanced Manager is going to knock on my door or send me an email whenever they release a new version of the app. Which means that I'm either going to be stuck with this version forever, or I'll need to develop a habit of coming back to this website to check for new updates on a regular basis. And if you're as forgetful as I am, then that's never going to happen. And this is just for one app. So you can see how using this method as your main way of getting apps is completely unsustainable. So we're going to look at how we could use Obtainium to automate the entire process that we just went through manually. Before we do that, though, I should mention that Revanced Manager is a bit of a special case because this specific app does actually notify you when it has updates, but that's not true for the vast majority of apps that you're going to see outside the Play Store. So let's just pretend and use Revanced as an example for now. So the first thing that we need to do to install Obtainium is to download it from the Obtainium website, which I will link in the description. We scroll down to the Download Universal APK button. But before we do that, I want to draw your attention to this weird looking line of text on the bottom of the screen. This is what's called the APK signature. Basically, when you download an APK file from anywhere, you're assuming that the website itself is legitimate, meaning that the APK you're downloading is the actual APK that the developer uploaded in the first place. Now, it is possible that some bad actor may have replaced the real download with some malicious APK that's gonna give you a virus or phone AIDS or something. This is the kind of issue that you probably don't need to worry about most of the time, especially if you're downloading from a website that you trust. But if you really want to go the extra mile and make sure that the APK you're getting hasn't been messed with, that's where APK signatures come in. Each APK file comes with a digital signature, which is kind of like a real signature in the sense that only one person is supposed to be able to create it, and nobody else is supposed to be able to forge that person's signature. I'm not going to get into the complicated theory of this. If you want, you can read up on it on the Android developer website or many other places. But for now, you just need to understand the basic concept, which is that if you know what the APK signature is supposed to look like, then you can compare it with the APK signature of the file that you've downloaded and confirm that they do in fact match with each other. One thing to note about APK verification is that if you're installing an update to an existing app that's already on your phone, then Android will automatically verify that the new update signature matches the signature of the already installed APK. You don't need to do that manually. So you only need to worry about app verification if you're installing the app for the first time. I'll show you how to do this later in the video, but I just wanted to mention it here because, let's face it, you're probably not going to watch the whole thing. For now though, I'm just going to go ahead and install Obtainium without verifying anything. So same as before, we download the APK, we open it and install it. So now let's take a look at how we can automate the process of installing Revanced Manager through Obtainium. Before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and uninstall it. So it's pretty simple. You just go to the Revanced Manager's GitHub page, you copy the URL, and you paste that URL into Obtainium on the Add App page. Now, you can see that there's a bunch of additional options down here. There's a lot of them, but for now we're just going to ignore them and tap Add. We have to wait for a few seconds for it to download the app. And boom, there we go. Revanced Manager has been added to Obtainium. We can see that the latest version that Obtainium was able to grab is version 1.24, and we don't currently have anything installed. So if I tap the install button, I do need to allow Obtainium to install apps. This is just a one-time permissions thing that you don't have to worry about later. And I just click install, wait for it to install, and that's it. We're done. From this point forward, Obtainium will automatically check for new updates to Revanced Manager from the GitHub page. It's going to do that once every 6 hours by default. You can change that by going to the Settings tab. And when it finds an update, it will notify me and I'll be able to install the update with one tap. And in fact, if you're running a recent version of Android and the app you're installing is also targeting a modern version of Android on the backend, then Obtainium can even install the updates to the app completely automatically in the background without any manual interaction at all. So I've gone ahead and created a scenario artificially where I actually have a version of Revanced Manager on my phone that's older than the current latest version. As we just saw a moment ago, the latest is 1.24 and I now have 1.23, and I have set the background update checking interval in Obtainium to 15 minutes. So now it's going to check for updates every 15 minutes in the background, and I will be able to show you what a notification for an update actually looks like. I'm actually not sure whether I'll be notified or whether Obtainium will automatically just install the update without even asking me, because that is a feature that's available for some apps and not others, and I'm not sure whether Revanced is one of them. It is something that you can disable if you don't want it. Either way, I'm just gonna pretend to be a normal user going about my day doing stuff, and at some point over the next 15 minutes I should get a notification telling me that that Revanced Manager has an update, or that it was in fact updated. There we go. We just got a notification and it tells us that Revanced Manager may have been updated to version 1.24. And the reason why it says may have been updated is because of a limitation in Obtainium that prevents us from really knowing whether a background update was successful or not. But at the very least, it has attempted to automatically install the update. So not only did it detect it, it also installed it without any interaction from the user. So we can just tap on the notification to open Obtainium and confirm that it really was updated. Yep, there we go, version 1.24. So that's a demo of what the background updates really look like. So that was just one example, and you can see how easy it can be to use Obtainium. The bad news is it's not always this simple, and we're going to look at another example which is a bit more difficult to deal with. But before we do that, let's talk about GitHub's rate limiting. Obtainium supports a lot of different source websites, as you can see if we go to the source section. But GitHub is kind of like the YouTube of open source software. It's the one big company that you can't really avoid. And to make matters worse, it's owned by Microsoft. So as you keep using Obtainium, it's quite likely that the majority of apps that you add will be from GitHub. Right now I only have 2 apps, so I can pull down from the top of my screen to check for updates manually, and Obtainium will of course do that in the background as I go about my day as well, and it looks like everything is okay. But if I had, let's say, more than 50 or so apps from GitHub, I would run into a rate limit error. Let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and import a bunch of apps from an export file that I prepared earlier. Import-export, by the way, is an essential feature that I think every app should have. If you don't have that, then you're going to be locked in. Anyways, so we now have 57 apps right here in Obtainium. I'm actually going to go ahead and delete one of them because it doesn't work right. But other than that, I have 56 apps. If I pull down to refresh now, you can see that it still does work, right? It successfully checked for updates. It didn't give me any error message. But the only reason it worked is because in my settings tab, I have a secret GitHub token that I pasted earlier. And that token is what allows me to send a ton of requests to GitHub without being blocked. If we get rid of this token and try again, and it might take a couple of tries, we can see that we are now getting an error message. GitHub is telling us that we have been sending too many requests and we can't really do that again for the next half hour. So the only way to get rid of this limit, unfortunately, is to create a GitHub account and generate what's called a personal access token. Save this token into Obtainium in this section here, and then it will work. You can see that after I run my import again, so that it brings back my token, I am once again able to check for updates. I'll leave a link in the description to a page that shows you how to create a GitHub token. You can also access that page through Obtainium by clicking on this link here. I know this sucks, but it is what it is. And for now, there's no real workaround. I guess it's just one more reason to avoid centralizing everything onto one platform. Okay, let's just clear out our list here. Now, let's look at another example. We're still going with GitHub for now, and this time we're looking at the Brave browser app. Now, just as a side note, I don't recommend you actually use Brave browser because they have had some controversies in the past and They include a bunch of crypto nonsense in there as well. But the way they release their app on GitHub is a confusing mess. So it does make for a good example. So let's go to their GitHub page. Now, if we scroll through the Brave browser releases section on GitHub, we can see that unlike with Revanced Manager, things are a bit more complicated here. The first release that we see is a nightly release. Nightly releases are not meant to be used by regular users. They're really meant for testing by developers. And that's why there's a small yellow pre-release label in the corner here. If we scroll down, we'll see that there's another nightly, except this time it doesn't have the little yellow label. If we scroll down again, there's another nightly with the label, and then there's a beta. This is also something that regular people shouldn't be using. It's really meant for testing. But it hasn't been labeled as a pre-release. Let's keep scrolling. We see another nightly, another nightly that isn't labeled correctly. It's only when we get to the bottom of the page that we see what we actually want. This right here is not a nightly, it's not a beta, it's an actual final version of Brave that a regular user would want to use. But for some reason, and I really don't understand why, they have labeled it as a pre-release. Now, Obtainium out of the box will automatically ignore anything that has been labeled with this little yellow label here. And most of the time, that's a good thing. But in the case of Brave browser, as you can see, because the developers aren't applying this label consistently, we cannot rely on it. If we tried to add Brave browser to Obtainium simply by copying the link and pasting it in here, and not changing any of the settings, then it wouldn't work. It would work, but it wouldn't give us the version that we want. It would end up giving us one of the nightlies instead. So how do we deal with this? Well, the first thing we need to do is tell Obtainium to include pre-releases. Don't ignore the releases that have the little yellow label. So that's what that toggle is for. The next thing we need to do is somehow figure out a way to ignore the nightlies and the betas. We can't rely on the yellow label, but we can rely on the release title itself. The actual title of the release has the word nightly in it, or beta, or release. And luckily Obtainium has a release title filter that we can use for exactly this kind of scenario. So the next thing we would do is we would find the release title field and just type release. Now let's try to add it. Okay, good news and bad news. Seems to be working, but there's another problem. This release has multiple APKs. If we look at the assets section, we can see that there are multiple APKs. In fact, well, actually, this isn't the one that we should be looking at. But either way, the release that's meant for Android, which is somewhere in here, this one here, it has a ton of different APKs. And Obtainium can't really know on its own which one you want. So you are either going to have to pick manually here, or you can add what's called an APK filter over here. Now, if you decide to just pick manually, then it's not really convenient because you will have to do that every single time there's an update. And Obtainium will never be able to automatically install updates in the background for this app. So it's better to use a filter if you can. So in this case, the APK we want is the one on top right here. It's the only one with the word universal in the name. So that's what we can use to filter for it. So I'm going to go down to the APK filter section. I'm going to type universal. And now we can click add, and it should just work. Yep, seems to be working. You can see that it's downloading the browser. And we're done. Brave browser has been added. I can choose to install it by clicking install. But in this case, I think I'll just delete it from the app. We've only looked at a couple of the additional options available to us when adding apps. As you can see, there is a lot here. And what's more is that different sources will have different options that you can tweak. We've only been looking at the GitHub source so far, so now we are going to go through every single additional option available for every single source supported by Obtainium. Just kidding. Neither of us have the patience for that, and I think you get the general idea. These options allow you to tell Obtainium how to handle apps that it can't deal with completely automatically. And if you want to learn more about specific options, then you can read the wiki or ask on the Obtainium GitHub page, both of which are linked in the description. Now, there are a ton of source websites that Obtainium supports at this point, including GitLab, Codeberg, F-Droid, and like I said, each of these come with their own quirks, limitations, and options, and we're not going to go over all of them, but I do want to mention one. This one at the bottom, the HTML source, is a generic fallback source that can be used on web pages that are not covered by any of the other sources. So if you have a web page that has an APK link on it, even if that website is not explicitly supported by Obtainium, you may still be able to get it to work with a bit of fiddling with the HTML source. Now, let's say that there's an app that you'd like to add to Obtainium, but it's really tricky. It requires a ton of different filters and other settings tweaks, and let's just say that you aren't sure how to set it up yourself. There's a good chance that somebody else has already done the work for you, and that's where the Obtainium Crowdsourced Configuration website comes in. This is a site that contains a ton of different app configurations that have been contributed by other Obtainium users, and you can add them to your device in just one click. Technically 2 clicks. So, for example, let's say I want to install Chiogram, which is the Android client for a really good Canadian voice over IP service called JMP Chat. Not an ad, I just really like them. I just search for it here, and I click Add to Obtainium. In Obtainium, I click Continue, and that's it. It's been added. From here, I can install it, just like any of the other apps, and you can see how this website can be really useful, especially if you don't have much experience with the kinds of filters that Obtainium supports. Keep in mind though that everything on the site has been contributed by the Obtainium community, so there may be stuff in here that's broken or even harmful. We do try to keep it clean, but use at your own risk. One last thing. We talked about app verification earlier. Now I'm going to show you how to actually do that. First, you need to install this app called AppVerifier. You can use Obtainium to install it, or if you have a Crescent, which is another app store that I recommend you check out, then you can get it from there too. I'm just going to go ahead and use this as an opportunity to show you the search feature as well. So we can just search for AppVerifier. Click on search. Select whatever we want to select. In this case, it's only GitHub. And the one on top is the one that we want. Pick that. Click on Add. And install. Now that we have AppVerifier installed, we can use it to verify apps. So I'm going to use Signal as an example. Let's just launch AppVerifier for the first time so we can click through the privacy policy and the license. Now, let's take a look at Signal. The Obtainium website does have a Signal configuration that we can use. So I'm going to click on Add to Obtainium here, click Continue. But before I install it, I want to make sure that the thing I'm installing is actually signed by the Signal developers. So in order to do that, I will go to the Signal website. And the good thing is that these guys actually do post their APK signature right here on the website. Not everybody does this, so it's not always possible to verify the app, but you should do it when you can. So the first thing I'll do here is copy this signature from the Signal website. Copy that. And now, when I install Signal via Obtainium, instead of installing it right away, Obtainium will first ask me if I want to share the app with AppVerifier. And this only happens if you have AppVerifier installed. Okay, it's downloaded, and now it's asking me to share the APK, which I'll go ahead and do. Now you can see that AppVerifier has opened up. It has detected the signature of the APK. And now what we need to do is we need to confirm that what we see on the screen here, the signature that we see on AppVerifier, is in fact the same signature that we saw on the Signal website. And we don't need to do this manually. We can just click on Verify from Clipboard. It will automatically grab the signature that we copied that's in our system clipboard and compare it with what the APK contains. And boom, there we go, success. Now you can see that there are two success messages on the screen, one on top here and one on the bottom here. I'm not going to talk about the one on top. Like I said, if you want to know more about how this whole system works, how apps are verified, how AppVerifier works, if you want to know how you can trust AppVerifier itself and verify it, those are all things that you can read more about, and I've left some links down in the description for that. So now I can go back to Obtainium and actually install Signal. If AppVerifier had rejected the signature, then it would be on me to click cancel here. So you need to pay attention to the result. So I'll just go ahead and click install. Okay, we're done. So that was Obtainium 101. There's a lot that I left out. For example, the way that Obtainium sometimes fails to compare the version number from the source website with the local OS, or how sometimes version numbers aren't even available, so we use pseudo versions. I didn't talk about how you can sometimes run into situations where the same URL leads to multiple completely different apps. I could have gone into the different source override options and the theming options that are available in Obtainium. For example, you can switch the theme to use a dark theme, pure black theme. You can change the color. So there's still a lot that I could have gone into, but this has been a pretty solid basic overview, I think. If you've understood everything in this video, you're good to go for the most part. For everything else, there's the wiki and the GitHub, both of which are linked in the description.